Welcome into this edition of RNN Talks here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you for joining me once again this week as we have a bit of an abbreviated episode of RNN Talks this week as there's not much going on this week. No races this weekend as it is Easter weekend, so NASCAR has the weekend off, and IndyCar and Formula One don't come back until April, so no predictions tonight. What are we going to predict? I don't know. You tell me what you want me to predict, I guess, because I don't have anything to predict for this weekend since there's no races for anything that we cover. So we're losing that in tonight's show, but we do have some things to talk about, namely the Formula One race from this past weekend, round number 1, the Australian Grand Prix. A lot of talking points in this race, and we'll just start off with the big one. Lewis Hamilton starts on the pole, and really, for the first part of the race, looks like he's going to run away with it. I mean, the Ferraris of Vettel and Raikkonen are there. They're really the only ones that I think could have really contended with him at all throughout the day. Being that his teammate Valtteri Bottas started way deep in the field and was only able to rebound to 8th. But then you have the pit strategy in the middle portions of the race, where Hamilton and Raikkonen go into pit. Vettel stays out a few more laps, and they end up getting a virtual safety car, a caution period. If you're more familiar with the NASCAR lexicon or the IndyCar lexicon. Apparently, I'm not super familiar with the rules here, but apparently you don't have to adhere to safety car speed under a virtual safety car on pit road like you do on the track. Vettel took advantage of this and held the lead through the virtual safety car period. Now, being that everyone had pitted and they all could get to the end of the race, this set Vettel up very well, and he never lost the lead from this point and ends up winning the race. So, an interesting pit strategy. I've heard some folks say that Ferrari's pit strategy was better. I don't know that Ferrari's pit strategy was better. I think they just got lucky in this sense. I mean, obviously you can't plan for a virtual safety car. That being said, they reacted to the virtual safety car very well. They knew the rules, and they knew how to circumvent the rules, I guess is the best way to put it, and end up holding the lead with Vettel when really I don't think anyone expected them to hold the lead with Vettel at that point. I think everyone expected Hamilton to reassume the lead and lead the rest of the race and win the race. That was not the case. So because of Ferrari's, I guess you could say, quote, pit strategy, although I don't know that I would call it pit strategy. It was just kind of luck on their part. They end up picking up the victory. Then there was the storyline of the Haas-Ferrari cars, or as they like to call them in Formula One, the Haas cars. I don't know, Gene Haas, that's how you pronounce his name. I've never understood why the F1 commentators call it Haas, because it's not pronounced Haas, it's pronounced Haas. But anyway, never mind that. Anyway, back to the Haas-Ferrari cars. They both were very strong in the early portions of this race. They both qualified up front. Unfortunately, both did have problems in the middle portion of the race. And neither one was able to finish the race. I think both were set up very well for good points-paying positions. Grosjean, when he had his problems, Magnussen. It was Magnussen. When he had his problems, he was running in 4th at the time. Grosjean, I believe, was 6th or 7th, something like that. So they were both running very well, and then they end up having their problems, and neither one ends up finishing the race, which is unfortunate, as they were both having a stellar day, a banner day, really, for the Haas F1 team, now with Ferrari power being Haas Ferrari. So I look for great things out of them this season. I look for a breakout year out of this Haas Ferrari team, given that they showed a lot of speed there in Australia. I don't know that we're going to see them contending for a championship just yet, but I do see them being maybe the second Ferrari team behind the Ferrari team of Vettel and Raikkonen. I see them being the next Ferrari-powered team in line week in and week out throughout this season. And speaking of motors, you have the Honda motors moving over to Toro Rosso this season, and both of them having engine problems. Hartley, I believe he only lost a cylinder. He didn't completely lose the engine, but he did. He was one lap off the pace, and very far behind for most of this race was Brendan Hartley, and never was contention with really anybody for a long period in this race because of the engine issues. And then Pierre Gasly ended up completely losing the motor in the mid portions of the race. Actually, very early in the race, actually 13 laps into the race, and ended up in the 18th position. So that'll be something interesting to watch throughout the season as well. How does Toro Rosso do with these Honda-powered engines? This is not a very good start for them. And then you have the Max Verstappen storyline. Was running very well. Then he has his issue through the middle portions of the race and does a complete 360 in turn one. Goes from, was he 4th at the time? I believe he was 4th at the time, all the way down to 8th. Does rebound to 6th by the end of the race, but still a very disappointing race for Max Verstappen. His teammate Daniel Ricciardo started further back than I think we're used to seeing a Red Bull car start. Started back in the, I believe it was the 8th position. Does get all the way up to the 4th position. Had he had a couple more laps, he might have even picked up the podium from Kimi Räikkönen, because he was right there and was closing. Unfortunately, could not quite get there by the end of the race. Which would have been great to see, as that would have been the first time an Australian has been on the podium in the Australian Grand Prix, but was not meant to be from Daniel Ricciardo in this race. Verstappen, though, after that 360, did end up rebounding back to the 6th position, but again, not the kind of race I think we expect from Max Verstappen, a kid that has been praised as having so much promise. Had a lot of bad luck last year and didn't really get to show that promise for a lot of the season. And I think a lot of us were looking at him for this year to be his breakout season. And at least one round in the books, and that is not the case. It is just one race, and there's a lot more racing left in the 2018 Formula One season. So we will see what Verstappen is able to do going forward, but not a good start for the Red Bull 33 car. Well, that's about all we got tonight for RNN Talks. Like I said, an abbreviated show because there's not a lot to talk about this week. We have an F1 race to talk about, but we have no predictions because there's no races this weekend for anything that we cover. So that'll just about do it for tonight. There will not be a pole position on Monday for the same reason. Nothing happening this weekend, so there's nothing to recap. So I guess I'll see you again a week from today, next Wednesday, for the next RNN Talks. And this has been RNN Talks. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.